All right, let's dive in. Today we're tackling a listener request. Lucrezia Borgia, huh? A name that just screams Renaissance intrigue.
Definitely. I mean, poison, power struggles, a reputation that could rival Machiavelli himself.
But here's the thing. The sources you sent, they paint a much more complicated picture. Way more to her story than just the scandals.
Yeah, the Borgias as a whole, they've been painted pretty dramatically over the years, haven't they? I mean, just look at Lucrezia's father.
Rodrigo Borgia, right?
Yeah, but most people probably know him better as Pope Alexander VI.
Okay, a pope.
With a reputation for ambition that would make any king jealous.
So we're already starting with a pope who wasn't exactly a saint, right?
Yep.
Then you add in Cesare Borgia, Lucrezia's brother, military leader, no stranger to ruthlessness.
Seems like she was born into the definition of a power struggle.
For sure.
And their enemies made sure everyone knew about it. They were powerful, effective, consolidated their influence like no one else. But in doing so, they made some serious enemies. And, well, history is written by the victors, or at least the survivors, right?
So you're telling me what we think we know about Lucrezia Borgia might be the Renaissance version of, like, fake news.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time history got a little embellished.
Yeah.
This is where the black legend comes in.
Okay, black legend, fill me in.
It's a term historians use. Describes those deliberate smear campaigns, trying to demonize someone or an entire family, often for political reasons.
Full-blown propaganda war. But instead of Twitter, it's like whispers in the Vatican corridors and scandalous pamphlets.
Exactly. And the Borgias, with all that wealth, that influence, they were prime targets for that kind of character assassination. So when we look at Lucrezia's life, we have to constantly ask ourselves, what's fact and what's fiction?
Okay, ready to separate fact from fiction. Let's start at the beginning. Early years. You mentioned Lucrezia was basically a pawn for her family's ambition.
Yeah.
How did that play out?
Her early marriages are a perfect example.
Yeah.
Think about it, right? In Renaissance Italy, marriage wasn't about love, it was about alliances. Pure power consolidation.
Right, strategic marriages.
Her first marriage, Giovanni Sforza. Totally political. Her father orchestrated it all, secure an alliance with this powerful family in Milan.
So teenager Lucrezia is smack dab in the middle of a high-stakes chess game. Family using her like a strategic piece.
An apt analogy. And when that alliance no longer served their purpose, well, let's just say annulment in the 15th century. Not exactly a smooth process. Lots of finger-pointing, maneuvering, the whole 9 yards.
Then she's married off again, right?
Uh-huh.
Alfonso de Aragon, Duke of Bisceglie. Oh, the strategic move, I'm guessing.
Absolutely. This one was all about strengthening the Borgias' position in Naples. But, like you might expect, things didn't go quite as planned.
Because Alfonso ends up not quite making it to happily ever after.
To put it mildly, he was murdered, most likely on Cesare Borgia's orders. Brutal. Really sent shockwaves through Italy. Added to the Borgias' reputation for ruthlessness, for sure.
Just imagine that. Lucrezia, barely an adult, married twice, both times purely political. And now her second husband, murdered by her own brother, like something out of Shakespeare.
Except in this tragedy, it's really hard to say who the real villain is. Was Lucrezia in on it? Or a victim? Or something else entirely? The sources we have don't give easy answers.
All right, let's dig into those sources. You mentioned some of what we know about Lucrezia might be misinformation spread by her enemies. Where does that come into play?
One of the sources you gave me, a transcript from a lecture by Giuseppina Mutarelli. She really challenges some of those traditional assumptions about Lucrezia.
Okay, tell me more. What's Mutarelli saying?
Well, she points out a lot of those really juicy accusations. Poisoning, incest, the works. They stem from her first husband, Giovanni Sforza. After the annulment, of course. I mean, think about it. He had every reason to badmouth her.
Scorned ex, spreading rumors. A tale as old as time, even in the Renaissance. But what about the rumors of incest, specifically with her father? Those are pretty hard to ignore, right?
They are, definitely. And they've stuck around for centuries. But Muzzarelli argues even those accusations, they don't have any real basis, in fact. Like, one source that always gets brought up is a quote from this poet, Jacopo Sannazaro.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
He refers to Lucrezia in a way that, could be interpreted as suggesting incest. But context is everything. We're talking about a time when political satire, slander, it was all fair game. It was how you discredited your rivals.
Like a Renaissance rap battle.
Yeah.
Poets firing shots at each other.
Exactly. Muzzarelli makes a really compelling case that Sannazaro's words, they were probably just a dig at the Borgias, mock their power, make them look bad. Not a literal accusation of incest.
That's where it gets interesting. So maybe Lucrezia wasn't the evil mastermind history makes her out to be. She was young, surrounded by powerful men, used as a pawn. But was she totally powerless? Or was there more to her, more cunning than we give her credit for?
That's the million-dollar question. And to get even close to an answer, we got to go beyond the rumors, deep dive into the actual evidence. Which brings us to her later years in Ferrara, because that's where we see a very different side of Lucrezia Borgia, a side that historians like Maria Bilanci, she wrote a whole biography on Lucrezia, argue is much more representative of the real woman.
Okay, I'm ready for the plot twist. Tell me about Lucrezia in Ferrara. Did she finally escape the Borgia drama and reinvent herself?
Let's just say the Lucrezia we meet in Ferrara is a world away from that figure shrouded in scandal and suspicion we saw in Rome. But that's a story for part 2 of our deep dive.
Okay, so we're back and ready to pick up Lucrezia Borgia's story as she enters this new chapter, new city, new life in Ferrara. Last we left off, she was a pawn in her family's political games, surrounded by scandal, and stuck with a reputation she didn't exactly earn.
Yeah, Ferrara is a stark contrast to that turbulent Roman world she left behind.
I'm picturing a total Renaissance makeover, new city, new palace, new husband. Did she finally manage to ditch the Borgia drama for good?
Not entirely. I mean, the rumors, they followed her, of course. But Ferrara gave her a chance, an opportunity to create her own narrative, to prove she was capable of so much more than just being a pawn in her family's schemes.
Okay, so she goes from political pawn to what kind of role does she build for herself there?
She becomes a major patron of the arts, surprisingly devout, and a pretty savvy businesswoman, too. Almost like she embraced a totally different set of values when she got there.
Hold on, wait. You're telling me the woman accused of poisoning and manipulating people was also this super religious woman? That's a twist.
It really is one of the most interesting parts of her story, for sure. The sources you sent, especially the YouTube video with that historian Giuseppina Muzzarelli, really highlight that transformation. Muzzarelli talks about Lucrezia's support of religious institutions, convents, and her genuine interest in theology, too.
So it was more than just putting on a show, like attending the right masses, donating money for good PR.
It seems like her faith was real. Her biographer, Bonaventura Pistofino, described her as pious and virtuous, someone truly devoted to her faith. And remember, this is the Renaissance. Religion wasn't just some Sunday thing. It was woven into every aspect of life.
Okay, so Lucrezia the devout duchess. Got it. But you also mentioned she was a patron of the arts. What does that actually look like in Renaissance Italy? Was she just throwing fancy parties and hanging out with poets all day?
Oh, it was way more than that. She was a true champion of Renaissance culture. Think about guys like Ludovico Ariosto. He wrote that epic poem, Orlando Furioso.
Right, Orlando Furioso.
He was basically a celebrity back then. And Lucrezia was his patron. She also supported Pietro Bembo, a big deal scholar and humanist.
Wow. Having the Duchess of Ferrara as your patron, that's going to be like getting a shout out from Beyonce or something these days. Must open some doors for these artists.
Absolutely. Lucrezia wasn't just throwing money at them. She was deeply involved in the whole cultural scene, using her influence to make Ferrara a real center for creativity, a Renaissance hotspot.
Okay, so we've got Lucrezia the pious, Lucrezia the patron of the arts, and then there's Lucrezia the businesswoman. You mentioned those land reclamation projects she was involved in. Sounds pretty ambitious even for now.
It was ambitious and super forward-thinking. Don't forget, this is a time when land equals power, and huge chunks of Italy, still basically marshes and swamps. Lucrezia, she saw the potential there, a chance to turn all that useless land into fertile farmland.
So hold on, she wasn't just lounging in her palace, sipping wine and enjoying her fancy art collection. She was out there, getting her hands dirty, making things happen.
Well, maybe not literally getting her hands dirty, but she was definitely involved, and on a huge scale. The YouTube video really gets into the size of these projects. So we're not talking about reclaiming a few acres here and there. She oversaw the transformation of vast amounts of land, boosting Ferrara's agricultural output and, by extension, the economy of the whole region.
That's some serious impact. Makes you wonder, what was driving her? Purely financial gain or something more?
From what the sources say, it sounds like she genuinely cared about the people of Ferrara, improving their lives. She saw the connection, how healthy land meant a healthy community.
So it was like Renaissance social responsibility mixed in with her sharp business sense.
Exactly. And this is the part of her story that really flips the script, right? Here you have Lucrezia Borgia, accused of all these horrible things, the supposed poisoner, the manipulator, the epitome of Renaissance ruthlessness, and she's doing things that actually helped people, that had a positive impact.
It's like she's trying to change what it meant to be a powerful woman in Renaissance Italy. Not just about controlling other people, but about using that power to create something good, something that would last.
It's a fascinating contrast. It really makes you question everything you thought you knew about Lucrezia Borgia.
Okay, so we've got Lucrezia the pious, Lucrezia the patron of the arts, and Lucrezia the businesswoman with a social conscience. Almost like she was trying to bury the black legend under a mountain of good deeds.
Yeah.
But did it work? Did she really escape her past?
That's the question, isn't it? Was she genuine? Or was this all just a calculated move to rewrite her story? And how did history end up judging her? We'll dig into those questions in part 3 of our deep dive.
All right, so back for the final part of our deep dive. We've gone from those scandalous early years in Rome all the way to Lucrezia's, well, kind of impressive transformation in Ferrara.
It is quite a journey, yeah. Political pawn to patron of the arts, businesswoman, devout duchess.
But let's be real, those early scandals, they're hard to forget. Did she ever address them? Try to clear her name, so to speak?
That's a question that's kept historians busy for centuries. It's tricky, though. Got to keep the context in mind, right? Renaissance Italy. Women, even powerful women like Lucrezia, limited control over their public image, to say the least.
Yeah, no PR teams back then, no tell-all memoir to set the record straight.
Exactly. So we don't have any direct quotes from Lucrezia defending herself. But some historians, they argue her actions in Ferrara speak for themselves. All that focus on piety, the arts, her people's well-being, it could be interpreted as a deliberate effort to counter that negative narrative she brought from Rome.
Almost like she's saying, look at what I'm doing, not the rumors. This is the real me.
Exactly. And it seemed to work, at least in Ferrara. She was respected, admired, even beloved by many. But outside those city walls, the Borgia name carried a lot of baggage. That shadow, it lingered.
So she built a new reputation, but the whispers never fully went away. What about the historians we've been talking about, Mozzarella and Bilanci? What did they think? How did history ultimately judge Lucrezia?
Both of them. They acknowledge the Black legend has been tough to shake. Even now, centuries later, she's still often portrayed as that manipulative seductress, the cold-blooded poisoner.
Still stuck in a historical soap opera, typecast as the villain.
Kinda, yeah. But they also push us to look beyond those simple narratives. Mozzarella, for example, she argues that Lucrezia's story often gets told as like a side note to the whole Borgia family saga. Gets lumped in with her father's ambition, her brother's brutality, as if she had no agency of her own.
Like she's just a character in someone else's play.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it's so important to examine her life on its own terms. The historical context, the limits placed on women, especially back then, it's all crucial.
So maybe she wasn't a villain, just a woman trying to survive in a world where power was brutal and the cost of survival was high.
A perspective worth thinking about. Maria Bilanci, in her biography of Lucrezia, she makes a similar point. Lucrezia, in many ways, was a product of her time. Born into a family obsessed with power, married off for political gain, surrounded by violence. It makes sense she'd develop a certain level of cunning, of pragmatism, just to cope.
Makes you wonder, what choices would she have made? Different family, different time period.
The beauty of history, right? Those what-ifs, those alternative paths, helps us understand human nature in all its complexity.
So final verdict time. Master manipulator, victim. Just trying to make the best of a bad situation. What's the answer?
Honestly, probably a mix of all of that. And that's what makes her story so compelling. It defies easy answers, neat categories. It pushes us to think critically about the sources, to question what we've been told, embrace the ambiguity of it all.
That's what the deep dive's all about, right? Not about finding simple answers. It's about exploring the complexities, the nuances, the things that make history come alive.
Lucrezia's story. Perfect example. She was a woman of contradictions, capable of great ambition, deep piety, political maneuvering, and genuine compassion. Her life was this tapestry woven from power, faith, scandal, and resilience.
What a journey. Exploring her world, trying to understand the woman behind the myth. Hope this deep dive gave you a fresh perspective on Lucrezia Borgia and maybe sparked your curiosity to keep exploring her story. What do you think about Lucrezia now? Let us know.
And until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep into the amazing world of history.
Happy diving, everyone.